Just pull out. I will show you. Okay. Sata block बनाइछ ना और इटु साता खान्तो इटु लाल देखिছে হ্যাঁ इटु একটা ব্লক और এনেকা একটা থাকিব দুইটা ব্লক और একটা থাকিব তিনটা চারটা এনেকা সাতটা বনাই
This is X junction. This is long jong kong.
কথা কথা এখন এফালে রিসার্চ করব বলে রো তাইলো তাকাndo জাঙ্গল দা মানে
Yeah, that is like too big, man. It should be some. Could be a jack. No, this looks like a scat, man. Sure.
We are working to conserve wildlife in Nagaland, a place of diverse people and habitats in northeast India. The people of Nagaland, in each place that we have visited, have been open and helpful, guiding us through their often dense forests and sometimes sharing their lore for tracking animals. The people of Nagaland are keen on protecting their wildlife, and with their help, planning our movements from village to village became a much easier task. Wildlife conservation is not only about the science, but also about the willingness and cooperation of the people we work with. This is the story of how we teamed up with the people of Nagaland in their efforts to conserve wildlife in their beautiful state.
Northeast India lies at the confluence of three biogeographical realms, the Indian, the Indo-Malayan and the Indo-Chinese. It's also recognized as a biodiversity hotspot, the Indo-Burma biodiversity hotspot. Now if you look at this region and move back in time, you will note that wide-ranging species such as tigers, elephants would freely move between source populations like what you have in, let's say, Kaziranga National Park in Northeast India and the large swaths of habitat that are there in Myanmar. Now this connectivity unfortunately has been broken in the last 50 years or so, and it's not because there isn't forest cover between Kaziranga National Park and the large swaths of habitat in Myanmar. If you look at the state of Nagaland, which intervenes this space primarily, it's a 17,000 square kilometer state, and 60 to 80% of the state is forested. The state is also home to 16 major tribes, each having its own distinct language and culture, and all of these tribes have had traditionally a close affinity to nature and to natural resources. So the key is to try and find a balance between achieving conservation in Nagaland while meeting the day-to-day livelihood needs of the people.
There is a lot of interest for conservation, and there are a lot of efforts that go into conservation. We want to make sure that those efforts have the best impacts and the most long-lasting impacts. That means those efforts need to be targeted at the ideal locations, at the ideal conservation activities, the most imminent threats to conservation. And when you use the best available science to prioritize such locations and conservation activities, that is science-based conservation, and that is one of the basic tenets of our program.
We want to cover entire Nagaland by selecting different villages from each part of the state. Generally selected by going on a scout to look for the current state of the forest, coupling with satellite and local information which is already available. Once the village with a promising habitat is identified, we approach village council, which is a local administrative body. Speaking to these council members gives us an initial understanding about their interest and willingness to conduct such conservation efforts in the village.
Science-based conservation can have a great impact in wildlife conservation in Nagaland. It can become the main tool to reach out to the people and spread awareness. For example, getting to know what you have in your land, how many species you have in your land, how many species are threatened in your land. All these examples can be of great importance and can to reach out to the people and make them realize the importance of wildlife conservation in Nagaland.
So we do extensive ecological surveys using state-of-the-art methodologies to find out what are those locations which are most important for animals, for them to survive, for them to move. we add that to extensive social surveys to find out where the support for conservation is maximum. And when you overlay these two layers, you get priority locations for conservation.
Conducting the ecological surveys in different villages in Nagaland is a lot of fun. You get to roam around the forest, you get to explore the forests of Nagaland, you get to see the landscape. Primary component of the project in Nagaland is to look at the distribution of different mammal species across Nagaland. So for this, what we look at is how populations of different species of mammals, how they fare in different villages across Nagaland. The species that we are looking at primarily are ungulate species, and adding to this we also look at elephants, we also look at carnivores, and if possible we also look at primates. What this particular component involves us to do then is to conduct ecological surveys inside the forests of those villages that we select for the project. So the ecological surveys that we carry out, they require about 5 to 6 days to complete. So when we're doing these ecological surveys, the first thing that we do, since it's usually a new area for us, it's a new village for us, we spend the first day scouting and mapping the boundaries of the village forest, trying to figure out where and how best to approach the forest during our surveys. Then after that, for the next 4 days or so, we split ourselves usually into 2 groups, and each group is then accompanied by a guide from the village, from the local village, who knows how to get around in the forest and who knows the forest. So he shows us basically different tracks and trails in the forest. And during these 4 days, we walk in the forest and we record all the information that we get regarding animal presence inside the forest. This information that we collect, it includes hoof marks, pug marks, claw marks, and scat or animal dung and animal droppings, and of course also direct sighting. So in addition to this information that we collect on animal presence, we also collect information regarding the forest characteristics, such as canopy cover of the forest or maybe tree density of the forest, in order that we may try to understand what factors inside the forest influences the presence of different species of mammals. However, there are few challenges that come with it. For one, it's a completely new forest area every time we go into a new village, and we're not familiar with the forest area, and we also have limited time for scouting, so trying to move around the forest, trying to enter the forest can be difficult at times. And the second thing is that Nagaland has difficult terrain. It's a hill state, and especially when you move towards the eastern part of the states, the hills get really steep, and so that can be problematic at times. Apart from those challenges, not many other challenges, but one thing is that we don't see a lot of direct sightings of animals in Nagaland, so we're highly dependent, our information is highly dependent on animal signs, so we need people with us who can walk the forest and who can identify animal signs.
We found sambar, we found mancha,
and
a lot of plantation.
One more sub-component within the ecological survey is that we're interested in also getting photographic evidence of different animal species, different mammal species that are found in the different villages of Nagaland. So what we are doing is, in a few selected villages, we're conducting camera trapping, where we keep camera traps inside the forests, which are motion triggered, and so if any animal passes in front of them, you get a picture of that animal, and so we can identify it when we get it back. So we put these camera traps for a period of about 10 days in a few selected villages in Nagaland, and also in the future, if possible, we hope to be able to carry out a much more dedicated camera trapping survey.
One part of the project in Nagaland is a social survey. So in the social survey, we've designed a questionnaire to supplement the ecological surveys that we've been doing in each village forest. So we spend about a week doing the ecological surveys, but of course we can't find out all the information present in the forest. So in order to know which animals are present in the forest or which animals were present in the past, we ask or interview about 20 people from the village. Apart from that, we also interview 2 people from the village administration, usually the village council, and we ask them regarding the distribution of animals there, which animals are found now, which animals have they seen, whether they can identify the animals that we're asking them about or not. In addition to this, we also ask them how willing they are to conserve animals, how willing they are to conserve their forests, and we ask them in what way that we as an organization or maybe the government also can help them in order that their way of living is more conducive to conservation. So this project in Nagaland has been very interesting. We've actually had to go into new villages, places that we're not familiar with, and meet new people. And this has been a bit of a challenge for us because we've had to develop completely new relationships with the people in these villages and their administration. We don't always have a point of contact there. The long-term goal of our project is to realize a vision of reconnecting wildlife populations in Northeast India with those of Myanmar. This may take a while, but in the process, we hope to at least identify important locations where we can work closely with local communities to try and help them conserve their forests.
One of the greatest challenges that I might have experienced in the few years that I have been working here at Nagaland is the fact that I was a little startled by the fact that our community, which once revered nature, once revered our surroundings, has begun to look upon this very source of life as an economic gain, as an economic activity. And so there's a world of difference between looking at the source of life as life-giving and as something to gain economically from. And this also has, I think, morphed and translated our understanding of our wildlife, which we take for granted, and that this penchant for hunting, for bushmeat, is stemming from the very fact that we are bereft of knowledge of our surroundings. So I think to overcome these factors, there is a need for greater engagement with communities from people who understand and know about the environment and nature, and there is a need to create awareness so that people can take their own decisions. And I strongly believe that once the truth is given, that the truth speaks for itself, and that people will make the right decisions about sustainable lifestyles and sustainable practices.
So hunting has always been a part of the Naga culture, but people somehow lived in harmony with nature. But eventually, with the introduction of modern weapons, it has become easier for the people to hunt, and people has also started using hunting as a sport. So reaching out to the people and spreading awareness has become a great challenge and the need of the hour, because wildlife conservation is a new agenda in Nagaland.
American conservation de ale beshi sal logode to si duk paise mane manu ke samjhabole time educated kurole beshi time lagi jai to bosti khan jum cultivation to mana kora to 30 sal nisina hoi jaise kintu forest de fire nohale ba itu hunting ban kora, especially trigu ban kora to ale 40 साल पर भी बेसी हो जाए तो ये कंजर्व करा तो बेसी इतना तो ভাল पाए से किले ट्रेगोपान तो पहला तो वाले ऊपर फाले ब्रीडिंग करे ताकन बच्चा दे किंतु आजकल तो उसरते बस्ती उसरते आई किने बच्चा भी दिया है पहला तो मानु के भय लगी किने इमान भी ना देखे आजकल तो दिखा भी दिखी जाए আছে और ये तो কনজেপ্ট কৰাটো চবেই ভাল লাগি আছে এতিয়াতো আৰু হাণ্টিংটো বেছি দূৰ পৰা তো কথা মিলাবলৈ দিগদাৰ পাই যাইছে কিলে এইটো ফ'ৰ ফাদাৰ খানো আমি এখন লগা ট্ৰেডিশ্যনেল নিচিনাহে লাগি যাইছে হাণ্টাৰ খানটো বেছি কিবা সমজাবলৈ দুখ পাইছে কিন্তু এতিয়াতো ইয়াৰলি উইণ্টাৰ ছিজনতে অলপ দিন খুলিব আৰু বান কৰাটো শুৰু হৈ যাইছে তো এতিয়াতো অলপতো পইলাৰ পৰা বেছি ইম্প্ৰুভমেণ্ট দিয়ে আৰু বেছি জনবি বেছি উঠলাটো খুচি পাই আছে আমি খান আৰু বেছি মিলিলেতো তাই কাৰণ এইটো নিচিনা আমি খান নিচিনা আৰাম পাব চব এইটো আমি খালি আমি নহয় কিনে চব আৰাম পাবৰ কাৰণে খুচি কৰিব লাগে কৈ কিনে এইটোৱে ভাৱনা কৰে
The state of Nagaland is currently witnessing a conservation movement. People in their own forests and lands want to conserve the wildlife that is there. And we want to support them in this process, and it's been really encouraging to see the positive engagement that we have witnessed during our travels through Nagaland. For example, we were conducting a conservation awareness program in one of the villages in Nagaland, and at the end of the program, the chairperson of the village council comes up to me and he says that, you know, we can completely and are happy to completely stop hunting in our village forests, but we are Nagas at the end of the day, and we require protein of some form on a day-to-day basis. So if you can help us in some way in meeting those requirements of ours, we are confident that we can completely stop hunting and help conserve the wildlife that is there in our forests. So taking a leaf out of that book, we are thinking of ways in which we can support the community to achieve this. We are trying to set up piggeries, fisheries, poultries even perhaps, such that we can meet the day-to-day protein requirements of the local communities while helping them wean themselves away from a traditional practice of hunting and relying on wild animals as their source of protein. This basically tells us something about the larger narrative of how the local communities in Nagaland are realizing that what they had is now beginning to dwindle and they want to do something about conserving wildlife, and it is our responsibility to help them in this process, and we are trying to achieve this in an informed manner with our science telling us which are the important locations in which we need to invest our conservation efforts, and thereafter working closely with the local communities to help them realize their own desire to conserve their forests and wildlife.